time for the final word in sports all across the state. You're listening to Sports Talk with your hosts, Phil Kornbluth, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. You've been waiting all day, so join the show now by calling 800-956-7266.
And a pleasant good evening to you and yours, and welcome into Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network on this Thursday evening, the 6th day of December, 2018. Will Pelagic, along with Professor Tom Hayes, will be joined by Phil Kornbluth in just a second. First Thursday crowd has gotten at least to where he is, but I hope you're enjoying yourself on this evening, where in Atlanta, they'll be giving out all the college football championship awards, basically the individual accolades, things like the Davey O'Brien Award, Butkus Award, things of that nature. Those all will be earned tonight. We already have somebody in the standpoint of Clemson that already has won an award tonight. The Ted Hendricks Award, given to the nation's top defensive end, will go to Cleveland Farrell from the Clemson Tigers. He wins the award here, and really not been much of a surprise here, Professor, as we kind of looked at this and saw the other candidates and saw, okay, maybe it looks like he can have this cinched up. It's an award that we know very, very well here from our coverage area. Daquan Bowers in 2010 won it for Clemson. Jadeveon Clowney won it in 2012 for South Carolina. And Farrell is the latest honoree from the Tigers.
And Farrell could break that award into three pieces and hand two to his defensive tackles who help him out a little bit. But he's deserving of that award. A lot of big plays, especially on third down, and Clemson needed from their D-line. Usually he was in the fray.
Of course, we'll start to talk a little bit more about these bowls, the Belk Bowl in Charlotte between South Carolina and Virginia, of course, and of course what's going on in the Cotton Bowl between Clemson and Notre Dame. South Carolina received some, at least according to multiple reports from the state newspaper and the Post and Courier, some once again disconcerting news regarding one of its players and possible injury. Javon Kinlaw from the defensive tackle spot. This has not been confirmed yet by the South Carolina Athletic Department or the football team, but according to those reports, he underwent a hip procedure to fix a nagging injury that had been bothering him during the course of this season, and because of that, we'll skip the Belk Bowl. Latest casualty for South Carolina, who has had its bevy of injuries so far this season, and when you think about where the Gamecocks sit on defense, it's kind of like last one out, turn out the lights, bro.
Well, you know, it's one of those things where you look forward to next season because you're thinking, okay, the pendulum will swing the other way and we'll stay healthy next year. It's almost like you see that in a lot of teams. But the one thing that worries you about, you want him to have good rehabilitation because a guy that big and that tall, when you talk about a hip problem, just multiply that to the average person. That's a difficult thing to navigate, being that line with a bad hip.
This is the one thing that I have from people from the standpoint of, I know that people want this last victory because they want to be able to, put that eighth win in the forefront, and I really want that from that particular standpoint. But this game for South Carolina is more about next year.
Yes.
It's not about this year. This year ended with the Akron game. This game is about next year, what you have for 2019. This game is about getting guys who didn't necessarily get the opportunity to get the kind of reps that you wanted. That's what the bowl practices are for, to get guys like Deshaun Fenwick more reps with the ones and get people who might be on the threshold of that 4-game redshirt level. I know that they're talking about maybe doing that for Ernest Jones. That's what these bowl games are for. And people are saying, oh, well, you want the bowl game to have you finish on the right track and all that. No, the bowl game is to get you a head start for next year, because the one thing that the teams that don't play in bowls don't get are the opportunities to have these types of practices and this extra time, which is so valuable with the head coaching staff.
Especially when after they finish, their academic obligations, they can concentrate totally on football, and while they're there, and then and the young people are really looking forward to being big players next year. And let's face it, South Carolina, somewhat out of desperation, had to play a lot of young players, and they showed flashes this year of what they can do once they figure out what they're doing, because they've got some talented people in that freshman class.
Love to hear from you again tonight. 800-956-7266 is how you get in touch with us. Email talkback@sportstalksc.com and on Twitter @SportsTalkSC. A little basketball last night, and once again, a crushing defeat for the South Carolina Gamecock men, a 73-64 loss at the hands of Wyoming. Carolina had themselves a lead in the first half. They led by 4 and led by as many as 9, but could not close it out. Wyoming with a 40-27 second half, and a second half that was dominated by the 3 ball. They shot 10 of 20 from downtown throughout the game, whereas South Carolina held to 3 of 20. The defensive metrics did not look good either, Pro, and just from rewatching the second half a little bit today on what I would call a more confident stream than the one I saw live last night, it just did not seem like South Carolina made the necessary defensive stops. There were a lot of bad closeouts, some bad fouls late, and also a post defense that looks largely, I would say, missing from South Carolina's arsenal.
Yeah, but interesting that you look at that. But also, people would tell you that Wyoming had only 1 offensive rebound. But then again, you say in the second half, they didn't need many offensive rebounds because it looked like everything they were throwing up, even from distance, was going in the basket. But it tends to show when a team has a lot of young players that they haven't figured out who the closer is yet. And there's the bottom line for South Carolina, especially in a road game in an environment like they faced last night.
And it's something too, because if of the 4-game stretch that they currently sit in right now, they play Wyoming, they play on Saturday at Michigan, they play home against Virginia, they play home against Clemson, Corn. There are not going to be very many opportunities for easy victories for this Gamecock men's basketball team. They missed a golden opportunity last night, and sitting now at 4-4, if they go into the end of conference play with a losing record, they're going to need to make some serious hay during the SEC season, which already looks pretty difficult, in order to get them going in to maybe get a winning record going in. I'm sorry, I was giving you an opportunity to try and get yourself settled here.
Can I complain before I comment about all that?
Sure. First Thursday?
Don't complain about the holiday traffic. No.
Coffee people, I'm hiding the label.
Yeah.
Really bad today. Really bad.
Oops.
Sorry.
And then, what's happening downtown?
We have First Thursday.
First Thursday.
First Thursday.
Okay. What is that?
It's every first Thursday of the month. There's a little bit of a sidewalk.
Is that why
festival.
there's not a parking spot between here and Irmo?
Correct.
That is correct.
Available?
Correct, sir.
Anyway, I should have been here on time. I apologize. To your question about
Gamecock men's basketball.
Yes.
You're familiar with them.
Yes. Pretty. Well, it's hard to watch a basketball game on Facebook.
It's
on
not
your
really.
teeny little screen.
It's not really.
I mean, good God, is that where we're heading with sports now? Facebook televising stuff?
I knew.
At least it's commercial free.
Yeah.
No commercials on Facebook, huh?
No.
Well, with so many people watching video on their phones, that's why they think they can miniaturize everything.
Well, mine was miniature, all right. I'm telling you. And I got a fancy phone, but it was a very small screen. It was so small, all those 3-point shots the Gamecocks missed in the second half looked like they were going in.
You could use the Chromecast and be able to put it up on your television like that.
True that.
You know how to do that.
True that.
You're not completely technologically illiterate.
No. But anyway, to the team and to the game, yeah, it was a terrible second half shooting performance by the Gamecocks, and it's just been kind of their modus operandi this year, just not able to be consistent from outside. Their yo-yo kind of a season, win a game, lose a game, win a game, lose a game. That's how it's been for them all season long to this point. And, look at some of the teams they've lost to. That was a 2-win team they lost to last night. Even though it was on the road, it was a 2-win team.
And a team that had a lot of injuries and had a very key contributor lost to an ACL injury going into the contest. Frank Martin said he talked to Alan Edwards the night before the game, and he said they knew that they were playing an undermanned team. They were playing a team that was going to have to play a lot of zone in order to beat them. So it wasn't like Wyoming was doing anything too terrible defensively. They just wanted it more than South Carolina did.
You got to make the shots inside when you have them.
You got bunnies. You can't miss them.
The one thing that freaks me out about any big man who misses a lot of layup, there's a reason there's a square. Use the backboard. Everybody tries to baby it over the rim now instead of just laying it off the board.
Or just slam it like I used to. You mentioned their upcoming schedule.
Yes.
Yeah, it's brutal. I mean, they're looking probably at a big L Saturday, another big L against Virginia. Clemson will be tough, though they're not exactly world beaters so far this year. So it's a tough road to hoe.
Well, they haven't beat them in the last 2 years.
Yeah. Okay. We'll be right back.
This is the place to talk Tigers, Gamecocks, and more. Sports talk across the state on the South Carolina Radio Network.
Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. As we mentioned earlier, the college football playoff 4 coaches had their annual sit-down in Atlanta in advance of the College Football Playoff Awards. Nothing really newsy comes out of those. The one thing that was asked about the game that does not involve Clemson, the Alabama-Oklahoma game, is that Tua Tagovailoa still underwent the procedure that should keep him out about 2 weeks. So if you count this week as 1 week and the next one is another week, then he should be able to at least get himself back into at least, if not all, at least a significant staple of Alabama's bowl practices before that game takes place in Miami. But, if he looks anything, Corn, like the way he did against Georgia in the SEC championship game, that 14-point line is a scary one just because of how potent Oklahoma's offense looked, not just over the course of this year, but head-to-head against Georgia in last year's Rose Bowl.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as good as Alabama's defense is, if your offense isn't giving you some time on the bench and giving you some breathers and stuff like that, it can wear you down. And even the best defense can be had by these offenses today because everything is in favor of the offenses, and we know how good Oklahoma's offense is, but their defense is so bad. I mean, if they go with Jalen Hurts, is there really going to be a major drop off in Alabama's offense? He plays with confidence. He knows the offense. They know him. And he actually gives them, again, that extra dimension of running the football more than Tagovailoa. So, yeah, you want the main guy in there, but it's not going to be a huge drop-off, as we saw in the fourth quarter of the SEC championship game.
That's the difficult dilemma for Oklahoma because, in my mind, Oklahoma has to start it off like a track meet and at least do like Georgia, get an early lead, because if you let Alabama get that lead and they crank up their running game against that defense, Oklahoma's offense will be spending most of their time on the sideline.
A quick note from the SEC, the all-freshman team announced today, 2 from USC, Dylan Wonnum and J.C. Horn. A side note that I've just learned from sources, both of them do plan to play in the bowl game against Virginia.
I knew you were going to do
Too bad about, the funny thing about this Javon Kinlaw story is that, first of all, nobody has confirmed it from the USC standpoint, but apparently the story generated from a Gamecock fan wishing him well and saying, sorry, you're going to miss the bowl game. It was a tweet back at him that was picked up and followed up on by the media, who are taking it at the word of this retweeter that he knows something about this hip surgery and that he's going to be out for the bowl game.
They're not taking it at the word. The people from the state and the Post and Courier have checked, at least with their inner-back channels, and have at least confirmed in their independent reporting on that. But again, this goes back to the same situation we're talking about. This all falls under the same umbrella with the Debo stuff. This is a nagging injury. This is not an injury that really would have kept him from playing in the game. But this surgery allows him to rehab it a little bit longer. It is better to have him ready to go in the spring or even more ready to go in the fall than it is to play in one, cover your ears, pro, meaningless bowl game.
Well,
meaningless.
Nobody's arguing that point.
If you're hurt,
you're not going to play. Who's arguing that point?
It's not that
that's not even the point.
He could have played. Is the point? He could have played.
How do you know? If he had hip surgery, the way that's going to sideline him, then I agree. If he's not 100% and you risk
further injury.
Well, not necessarily further injury, but you risk setting him back in complete recovery, then by all means, don't play. But if you're healthy and 100% and able to go and got nothing holding you back.
The way this report reads, he's played through this hip injury all year. So this is basically to fix a nagging injury that had been plaguing him throughout the entire season and played through it. So there's no telling that he probably could have played through it if, say, they were in the college football playoff, perish the thought. But, from the standpoint of where South Carolina sits right now, it is better for them and their future to have him sit this game out.
I don't disagree with that.
And for his future to play at the next level.
All right, let's get to the phones. 800-956-7266 is our phone number. Keith in Aiken, welcome into Sports Talk tonight. How are you?
I'm doing great. How y'all doing?
We're good.
Good. Speaking of future, where do you really believe you go back 2 years ago basketball-wise, and you just get everyone's excited, and then we are where we're at today. And I mean, what do you perceive in the future? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but it sure reminds me of the Titanic, who when it was built, they said it couldn't sink, but it sure seems like we're heading that way. Is that premature?
Yes.
Well, they hadn't capitalized on their Final Four appearance, as we talked about before. They had a bad year last year, and they lost all those players, and they didn't recover. Then you had a major roster turnover, and now you're left with playing a bunch of young guys, and your older guys have not played well to this point. And so that's kind of put you in this spot. Now, if they can hold this bunch together, I mean, I think it's a talented group of young players. This season looks like it's going to be a flame out at this point. But if you can keep Moss and Lawson and Bryant and Frank and keep all these guys together and add the guys that you've got coming in, and they're still recruiting the player out of Indiana from Rochester, New York. What's his name?
Drumgoole.
Yeah, they're still recruiting him for the spring signing period. He's a good player, apparently.
Add Hannibal, add Levesque, add Anderson in the mix. I mean, here's the thing, and I know you always like to say they didn't capitalize on their Final Four run. They never were going to. That's not the way basketball recruiting works. Basketball recruiting works from the standpoint of the Blue Bloods get all the good players, and you at the other levels have to develop from guys who are going to be there 2 to 3 to 4 years. The problem that South Carolina has is that after their Final Four run, they had nothing left other than Chris Silva, Hassani Gravett, and Mike Kotsar, and a bunch of grad transfers and bodies that did not belong on a Division I basketball team. So last year was a kaput year. So now this is the first year of the reset. This is the first year where we can actually judge whether or not Frank Martin belongs where he belongs with the South Carolina basketball team. To judge him based off of 8 games with a freshman-laden squad and 3 upperclassmen, 2 of which really haven't contributed at all over the course of the young season, would be a gross miscarriage of justice in fans' minds.
Well, 9 Division I major college players came through the state in the last 2 recruiting classes. He and Brownell got 1 between the 2 of them. Each with a lot to sell. Neither one capitalized on it in recruiting. You can try and spin it however you want to. They didn't capitalize in their own backyard, number one. And number two, this season looks like it's going to be dreadful because they are 4-4 now, and they're looking at potentially, about a 5-game losing streak going into the new year. Well, they'll play North Greenville. They should beat North Greenville, but they're looking at a little string of losses here. And then you hit SEC play.
Right.
And when you play conference teams, they know you, and they know your tendencies, and they know your weaknesses. They know how to attack you. That makes it even more difficult. And I don't see this season at this point in time turning around and being a postseason season for them at all. Not even CIT, or what's the other one? CBI or
NIT.
Please let us in, whatever the tournament is that you want to try to get into.
The thing is, I think for some fans in South Carolina, they have to think of program and not think of, man, we got these great facilities here, but you're not a blue blood. So you're going to have to build. Clemson has to do the same thing. The key point is you have to ask yourself your perceptions, and we understand the giddiness of the Final Four. But if you looked at that team, as Will said last year, the way it was put together, you look at that with the perception of how in the world did they win 17 games?
Exactly.
All right, 800-956-7266 is our phone number. Email talkback@sportstalksc.com and on Twitter @SportsTalkSC.
And I defy you to find another head coach in the country who could have gotten 17 wins out of that bunch of cast of misfit toys that they had on that team last year. Frank Martin is the right coach for this program, and I have confidence that he'll get it done given the amount of time that he needs to make this happen.
All right, we'll be right back.
hitting percentage than our Wednesday pairing of guests. Our weekly visit with the coach and the QB, the coach Chuck Reedy, QB Steve Tannehill, joining us for their regular Thursday spot, final spot of the regular season for them as we look ahead to the bowl season, look back on the season that was for both South Carolina and Clemson. Corn.
We got them well trained. They know where to be on Thursday nights. What is today? Thursdays at 6:30.
Thursday all day.
Got to get my days right here. Thrown off by being late to the show tonight.
First Thursday.
Good to have you with us.
First one.
Chuck Reedy and Steve Tannehill. We wrap up the regular season with them. We'll hit them back up again around bowl time and college football playoff time. But thank you so much for being with us, Coach. Good seeing you last week.
Well, it was great having y'all down. We really appreciated it. And we got a lot of very positive comments about the show.
Yeah, thank you. And the place was great. And Steve, we keep trying to come to your place. You keep rejecting us. You keep rebuffing us. Maybe if we were a band, maybe if the three of us could put together, or the four of us, including Brian, could put together a little band, you'd let us come there.
I might. It's quite possible.
I told you. You said you were looking for a band for Friday. I could take 2 hours off your hands and drive the crowd away with a little open mic performance there.
We're gonna pass on that. I got somebody.
Nice.
All right. So let's look back quickly
You'll be lamenting that
last weekend. Let's begin with Clemson. It was last weekend, right?
Yes.
My weekends have all run together.
Yes.
So last weekend they rolled Pittsburgh as expected. Chuck, what'd you see from the Tigers in the championship game besides just pretty much domination from the first offensive play?
Well, that was it. I mean, it just goes to show, the difference between Clemson and the rest of the ACC. I mean, there's nobody in that league that's even close to the talent level that Clemson has. When Clemson plays, they're 3-4 touchdowns better than anybody in the league. And until things change, somebody, Florida State, Miami, North Carolina, somebody, begins to recruit at a higher level. I don't see that changing much in the near future.
And Steve, the Gamecocks at home in that sloppy situation with Akron, they get the win. It was, very poor play in the second half. They looked very good in the first half. They were sharp, and then the second half, I guess, weather conditions, everything else, the turnovers. But a 7th win sets them up for a potential 8th win in the bowl game. So if they can get that 8th win, does that still count as a step forward for this team, even though it's a win short of last year's mark?
That's a tough question. To be honest with you, I don't know. We still haven't had that win. We haven't beat that team yet. I think we beat everybody probably we were supposed to. Lost 2 close ones. I think we could have won. So I'm not sure. I think you got to win the bowl game. I think they overachieved a little bit in 2017, and so I'm not sure. The way the defense is playing, I know there's a bunch of injuries, but that's kind of the one thing I look at is didn't make a step forward. I think the offense did. I think the offense coordinator is a definite upgrade, and I like where we're headed on offense. But we've got to find some guys. We got to get better on defense. We need that guy. We got to find that guy, that headhunter, that guy that everybody's worried about on our defense. And, maybe it's the kid, the Gatorade Player of the Year that's coming. Who knows? We got to find one.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, much of the discussion this week, gentlemen, has been about, the bowl games that sit outside of the college football playoff, whether it's right to treat them as exhibitions or whether you should play in them even if you have collegiate eligibility or at least a draft eligibility in the offing. I'll start with Chuck and then move to Steve. What is your thought on Debo skipping the bowl and other players of his ilk skipping their bowls?
Well, I'm obviously old school. I don't agree with it. You can get hurt, doing, in the weight room or doing agility drills or, training for the draft. I mean, you make a commitment to a team and I think you play it out. I mean, I don't agree with it. You can justify the logic if you want to,
But I don't think so. I mean, I think the guys, they need to play the season out.
Mm-hmm.
Steve?
With him, it's different. I'm old school too, along with Coach. If it had been me, I'd play. I just love the game so much. If they'd have told me I could have sat out a week of practice, I'd have done that. For sure. But, to miss a game, man, I can't imagine missing a game. And, I understand there's a lot of money at stake, but is he a first-round pick? I thought most of the time the guys that did that were like the top 10 or 15. I'm not sure. I didn't know that he was rated that high. So, I wish he was playing. I think he helps our team, and he's the best offensive weapon we have. And I don't think you're going to see our whole team because he's not playing. I can understand him wanting to protect himself. He's been hurt a bunch. This is the first season he's played every game. So I understand that part. But myself, or if I was the coach, I'd want the guys to play, man. You make a commitment to your teammates, and I think you ought to honor that commitment. And I said the same thing about, Kelly Bryant leaving his team, and then we saw what happened with Alabama's guy staying with his team, and look what happened. So I think you make a commitment to the team. You should be a team guy.
When is a coach going to speak out like you guys and say what they really feel? I know that, if they do, it's going to be used against them in recruiting.
Barry Odom spoke out and said positive things about Drew Lock playing in his game and not sitting out. So, I mean, there are coaches who are like that.
No, I'm talking about the ones that decide not to play. When is a coach going to say what he really thinks, Coach, and say, you know what, I don't agree with you walking out on the team? And in Debo's case, and I guess I'm picking whoever's managing him right now. I'd fire them to begin with, because the day after he announces he's not going to play in the Carolina Bowl game, he announces he's going to play in the Senior Bowl. Now, what do you think that says to Gamecock fans, Coach?
No, well, it says it all. I mean, it's all about, trying to, project yourself, I guess, higher in the draft. And, you project yourself high in the draft by how you play, every game. I mean, he's been evaluated all season, and if he played in the bowl game, he'd be evaluated there. If he played well, it would help him.
Yeah.
I don't, as far as coaches, it's just a sensitive situation. You don't want to, alienate a guy that's, been on your team, we're part of your team for 4 or 5 years, as he's leaving. I mean, I understand it, but, somebody at some point, will is going to stand up and say what probably most of us think.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with him gone, that opens up an opportunity for some of those young receivers. But just a blanket statement from you, Coach, when you got young players that you're trying to develop and you're thinking in your mind, not only this bowl game, but next year, what are practices like in order to get participation in getting snaps for those young players who may not have played much this year, but will be integral parts of your offense and defense coming up in the next season?
Well, the great thing about going to a bowl is that you get another 3-4 weeks of practice. And I know when we were at Clemson, we always played well in bowls for the most part when Danny was there. And that's because it was 2-a-days for the first couple of weeks. I mean, we worked hard, but we kept the young guys, that hadn't got a lot of work with the varsity coaches, throughout the season. I mean, we kept those guys after every practice, and they would get another 30 to 45 minutes of work. And so what you get is another spring practice for those young guys. And that's, one of the benefits of going to a bowl. And it's a big benefit because that extra practice is very beneficial to the young guys in particular.
All right, guys, hang on. I want to hold you over for just a couple more minutes and wrap it up. We're talking with the coach and the quarterback, Chuck Reedy and Steve Tannehill, here on the Sports Talk. Group therapy is open for business tonight if you're interested in going by. And the Comeback Shack, for those of you in the Charleston area, they'll sell you a delicious hamburger or chicken sandwich or some salad, anything else that you might want. We'll be right back.
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
Okay, we're back with the coach and the quarterback. Quick little final wrap-up segment here. And, guys, let me just say for all of us here at Sports Talk how much we appreciate you, too. We thank you so much for being with us all season long. I know it's tough. Sometimes you're in Turkey and Croatia. Sometimes you're up in a deer stand. You guys have been with us through thick and thin, and we thank you very, very much. So we'll get back with you leading into the bowl and into the college football playoffs. But just looking ahead, Steve, Gamecocks in Virginia, we talked about the importance of getting the win. But you like this matchup for South Carolina against, mid-level ACC team. And, of course, we've all been deriding the ACC this year as being a lousy league. So here's the chance for South Carolina to kind of step up and help prove that again.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a game we've got to win, based on what I've seen from the SEC or the ACC this year. So I look at it as a game we should win with or without Debo. The loss of Bailey is going to hurt us a good deal. He was having a really solid year. So, we got some time. Like I say, Bryson Allen Williams will be back for the bowl game. That'll add a spark to the defense. But it's a game I think we should definitely win. And hopefully we can do that to get the 8th win. Again, like I said, a little disappointed we haven't beat that team yet, but 8 wins is good, especially we're a relatively young football team.
Well, Chuck, looking at this matchup for Clemson, it's a team that, while whether or not you think about regardless of what you think about their personnel, they've gone through a lot of the same type of adversity that Clemson has. When you think about the fact that they had to change their quarterback middle of the year, a couple of close calls, how do you see the Irish matching up with the Tigers?
Well, I don't think that that they're athletic enough, and I think Clemson's speed and athleticism, will be too much for Notre Dame. Hadn't they haven't played anybody like Clemson. And they struggled with some people that that weren't very good. Pittsburgh being one of them. I think it's a good matchup for Clemson. They could have ended up with a much tougher matchup than what they've ended up with, I think.
All right. So, and we'll go into more detail on this when we get back with you. But just to wrap it up, Steve, come January 7th, who is lifting that trophy?
I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I think if you look at it on paper, it's Clemson versus Alabama, but that's why they play the game. So I think Alabama has the most talent, but we'll see. I haven't looked at it enough to determine that. But I think Alabama has the most talent.
You just can't bring yourself. You just can't bring yourself to say it, can you? You and Corey Miller. You just can't form the words Clemson national champions. How about you, Coach? Who raises that trophy?
Well, I think Clemson. I think Clemson's in really good position. I thought Alabama all along, but the more you've watched them, especially the last couple of games. Of course, Tua was hurt last week, but he struggled a little bit. I think that Trevor Lawrence is just getting better and better and better, and it'll be. I think it's going to be those two, but it's going to be a little bit. They've obviously, they've kind of separated themselves from everybody else in the country, it looks like, over the last 3 or 4 years. But I think Clemson's in really good position.
All right, guys. Thank you so much, Coach. Enjoy the holidays. Steve, enjoy the holidays. And we still want to get over to group therapy and help bring a crowd there to you.
Are y'all a four-piece band? Like Hootie and the Blowfish or what?
We can be. Corn and the Crocodiles. Corn and the Crocodiles.
We're having a group therapy tour here in a couple of months. What's your tour called?
Corn and the Crocodiles. I hadn't even thought about it. We'll come up with one.
You might have to pay me to play there.
We'll call ourselves, you heard of the Four Tops, we'll call ourselves the Four Bottoms.
I don't know if you want that.
You don't like that either, huh?
Phrasing Phrasing, please.
I'm still going to reach out to you about doing a show there because I owe you one. All right.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you. Thank you. Coach, thank you, man.
Thank you.
We'll
Thank
see you.
you.
Thank you. Yeah, I do want to do a show from group therapy.
Yeah.
You don't like that, the Four Bottoms?
You sound like you need group therapy after suggesting that name.
The Four Bottoms. Let's do recruiting here real quick before we get to the top of the hour. We'll have time. We blew off a bunch of phone calls. We apologize for that. We'll get back to calls here in the next hour. Mike Morgan on the Move will be here the next hour.
Heard of him.
Been a while. Been a while.
Familiar with his work.
We're going to hear from Dabo Sweeney.
Familiar with his work as well.
David Shelton. High school previews.
There'll be a lot.
Got a lot.
We have a lot.
All right, recruiting very quickly. Offensive lineman Matthew Bedford of Memphis had good official visits to USC and Mississippi State last weekend. This according to his coach. USC offensive line coach Eric Wolford was in on Monday. Will Muschamp is due in next week. He will visit Indiana this weekend, and then he's going to take an official to Memphis. That's an addition to his plans. That's new. That'll wrap up his visits. No indication from him to his coach as to a favorite just yet, though he has been committed to Indiana. Obviously, that's a loose commitment. That's my new term for weak commitments. It's a loose commitment. Loose. Clemson offered 2020 defensive end Damon Clowney of Baltimore.
Familiar name.
It is. He has an offer from USC. He is a cousin of Jadeveon Clowney, and he is a national prospect. Per Roswell High coach Matt Kemper, Will Muschamp today was at his school this is in Georgia, to meet with linebacker Tyron Hopper, who visited last weekend. Florida coach Dan Mullen had an in-home on Tuesday. He will visit Florida on the 14th. Auburn also is involved. Of course, Hopper has been committed to Florida, and South Carolina is trying to flip him. He used to live in Gaffney. He now lives with his uncle in Roswell, and two of his cousins were recruits over the last 2 years, so they have been through this process before. They're in the family. USC target cornerback Johnny Dixon of Tampa will take that official visit to Miami this weekend and one to West Virginia next weekend. He confirmed those plans today. Miami was in for a visit this week. South Carolina is doing his home on the 12th. He will announce on the 19th. 2020 offensive lineman Ryan Jackson, who is 6'3", 290 of Lebanon, Tennessee, visited USC for the Tennessee game. He has been hearing via text from Eric Wolford, USC's offensive line coach. He really likes him. Jackson has not yet been offered, but several teams are picking up the interest in him. Clemson offered 2020 tight end Lucas Unger, 6'4", 225, Morristown, New Jersey. Michigan, Cal, Wisconsin, and Stanford, some other offers. Tigers also offered 2020 tight end defensive end Braden McGregor, 6'6", 250, Port Huron, Michigan. Michigan, Alabama, Michigan State, Iowa, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Wisconsin, and others have offered him. USC offered a pair of 2021 teammates from Miami. They're both corners, Jason Marshall and Corey Collier. Michigan coach Jim Harbaugh had an in-home visit earlier this week with linebacker Kravaris Crouch of Charlotte, a Clemson target.
Was that an in-home or a?
It wasn't in-home.
Okay. Well, how personal was the visit?
Personal as it could be, I guess. I don't know how personal it was.
I can make this really.
I mean, I made a typo on Twitter. All right, hang me.
I can make this really uncomfortable by making one name.
Fine.
I'm not doing it. Not doing it.
Dan Mullen and several Florida coaches were in last night to see committed cornerback Jadon Hill, and Hill says he's now shut down his recruiting per Gators territory. The USC was attempting to turn him. USC commitments corner Cam Smith, Westwood, and defensive end Rodriguez Fitton of Atlanta will take their officials this weekend. And I believe we have covered everything else. So there you go with recruiting. We remind you, if you're smart, you will check out our recruiting online on our website, SportsTalkSC.com. Check out the recruiting podcast, recently updated yesterday.
I listened to it.
16 minutes of pure recruiting bliss is what it is.
I'm not going to tell you what I was doing when I listened to it.
I don't want to know what you're doing, but if it took you 16 minutes, you got a problem. And and on Twitter, use the hashtag STRecruiting.
Catnap?
We'll be right back.
Round 2 of Sports Talk up next with your hosts Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. Don't leave us hanging. Join the show, 800-956-7266.
Welcome back, Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network on a Thursday from downtown Columbia. The newest, hottest group on the scene, the Four Bottoms, are here.
No.
It's me, along with Willie P., the pro, and Brian Leonard.
So
Leonard.
So are you going to be John Lennon, the one that breaks us all up? Mauricio, you're going to play Yoko?
I would be, if I were in that, I would be Paul McCartney. I'd be the cutest. I'd be the one the chicks would be screaming for. That's who I would be if I were in the Beatles.
I think we're all looking at each other with a perplexed look on your face that does not translate well to radio.
Let's go to Michael Morgan. Hey, he's still alive. Rumors of his demise. False on Twitter. False news. Fake news. Mike Morgan here with us for another edition of Morgan on the Move.
And it's brought to you by the fine folks at Founders Federal Credit Union, the mortgage team more equipped than ever to help you with the mortgage process. FoundersFCU.com/mortgage, and by BP Skinner Clothiers. People nationwide get their custom-made suits and accessories from Brent Skinner. Find their showroom in the Vista, or no matter where you are, Brent will come to you. BPSkinnerClothiers.com to set up an appointment, which I plan on doing for my Christmas suit.
Excellent. Mike, good to have you with us. Been a little while. We've been busy. You've been busy. Catch us up on where you've been.
By the way, kudos to your cohort there for going to BP Skinner. There's a man with taste and panache. I hope you get there someday, Mr. Kornblut. Someday we all have hope.
They make it size?
They won't let me in the door.
Well, maybe not. Yeah. At any rate, no, it's been fun. It's been, I guess since the last time we spoke, was in your neck of the woods for the South Carolina game against UT Chat, and then went straight to Orlando for the Advocare Invitational, which always has a really good field. 8 teams there, including Villanova, who won it, Florida State, LSU, etc. College of Charleston, of course. College of Charleston played really well, actually. Got a chance to call a couple of their wins, including the last one over Memphis and Penny Hardaway. I like what Coach Grant has there. I think they got a good chance to make it back to the NCAA tournament. And then after that, a couple of more hoops games, and then heading to Baton Rouge this weekend for another one. So that's been about it.
All right. So just kind of give us your take on the early scene here. It's still relatively early, the early college basketball scene. I watched Gonzaga last night. Boy, they look really good once again. That West Coast game. I love that West Coast game with Bill Walton on the call. It's always a lot of fun to listen to. What's your take nationally and more regionally about what we've seen here in the early weeks of the basketball season?
Well, you mentioned the Beatles you guys were talking about before I came on. I think through the first few games, everybody thought Duke was the Beatles. I was kind of amazed by a little bit of the hyperbole. I mean, they're a great team, and Zion Williamson is a phenomenal and entertaining talent. But I don't even think they're the best team I've seen in college basketball in the last 20, 30 years. I'm not putting them up there with the Fab Five. I'm just not there. I think there was a major rush to judgment on Duke. I think Gonzaga is the best overall team. I think Gonzaga's right up there. And, I think there's a couple of really good teams in the SEC. And I'm not even talking about Kentucky. I'm talking about Tennessee and Auburn. North Carolina, of course, in the ACC. There's a lot of really good teams out there. But Duke's the most exciting, and they'll get all the headlines, and they'll lead SportsCenter every night. But at some point, the great thing about college basketball is that you have to do it over the long haul when you get to the tournament. You can't just kind of will your way in there and then play 1 or 2 games and go out. It's a little more diversified than college football right now. So I think we're still trying to figure out who some of the other great teams are this year in college basketball. But it's not Duke and everybody else like a lot of people wanted you to believe a few weeks ago.
Again, I ask you this with very limited viewpoint, but just from the wide angle scope, it seems that the two of the biggest teams in the state of South Carolina have disappointed when it comes to what the Gamecocks have done this season or haven't done this season, and what Clemson hasn't done to this point in the season. And it seems like the mid-majors, Furman, Wofford, College of Charleston, have really risen to the occasion and looked like the best teams in the state. How much do you attribute that to the fact that these teams are able to get guys, keep them there, and churn out these experienced groups that have gone through the wars and are better attributed to be in these wars?
Will, it's everything. It's everything in college basketball. When you can be old, that is full of juniors and seniors. And look, it can't be chopped liver. Experience alone is not going to do it, but those programs know how to recruit good players. They're a different kind of player that are going to go to the heavyweights and the Power 5 schools, but they're good nonetheless. And bigger is not always better when it comes to college basketball. And sometimes, really, when you line them up and you have those games where it's an SEC or ACC school going up against mid-major, really the only line in the sand is size. They're a little bit bigger at each position, but they're not necessarily better at shooting, better at passing, playing better in the context of an offense. Very often that edge goes to the mid-major, which is why you see so many upsets, which is why they continue to happen in college basketball. Now, look, eventually the cream usually does rise to the top. And when all is said and done, the best programs will likely come from the Power 5, or in this case, the Power 6, however far you want to stretch it out. You certainly got to include the Big East when it comes to college basketball, but that very often is the case. But for the meantime, in November, December, teams are still trying to figure themselves out. Clemson and South Carolina, to me, are two different animals right now. Clemson, I would expect to be very competitive this year in the ACC. Brad Brownell had the year that he really needed to kind of get some momentum going. I would imagine that would carry over in recruiting and other areas as well. With South Carolina, I mean, gosh, you have to wonder if they had Bowen, if they had Cousinard. That's what Frank was hoping for. Obviously, that did not happen. And so it's a different-looking roster with a lot of young players. I don't know what's going on with Silva. I haven't seen them enough. I've only heard kind of secondhand reports, and everybody seems to believe that he is not the same player for whatever reason. And I wonder sometimes, that we used to use the term in school, senioritis. Mm-hmm. I wonder maybe if he's having a little bit of that, if he's a little bit disappointed that he's not playing pro ball, but he's never going to play pro ball if he doesn't pick up his play. So I'll be curious to see if they start stepping it up.
Yeah, say paralysis by analysis. One of the other teams I like is Michigan. They seem like they could get there, but a team that really still is a question mark that I have that has talent, and you can explain what's wrong with them, because maybe you've done one of their games, is Florida.
Yeah, I just saw them, and they bounced back against West Virginia, and they've got a good-looking point guard who's kind of a very much in the mold of a Gilgeous-Alexander, who, again, nobody knew who Gilgeous-Alexander was at this time last year. He wasn't even supposed to start over Quade Green. He was kind of the oh-by-the-way recruit surrounded by a bunch of McDonald's All-Americans. His game, Numbard's game, is similar to that. He's a tall point guard, sees the floor well, good enough shooter. But Kayvon Allen, to me, speaking of seniors that have not elevated their play, he hasn't done it. They're still a work in progress in my eyes. Again, I don't think they're one of the top three teams in a loaded SEC this year. And that becomes the issue for a lot of teams in that conference this year. If you're not really good, you're going to be humbled a lot. And that's why you have to figure things out now in November and December to get ready for a grueling 18-game conference slate, because there's very few let-ups this year in that league.
Talking with Mike Morgan on the move. We got some Dabo Swinney coming your way. I do want to hold Mike over for just a couple of minutes if the rest of the bottom four here will agree to that decision on my part, which I do make unilaterally, by the way.
If you drop that name, yeah, we'll agree.
If we ever got a word in edgewise on this program, that would be the first time.
We'll continue talking about the college basketball scene, a little bit more on the college football scene. This note coming out of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution from their beat writer saying that all signs are pointing to Temple coach Jeff Collins emerging as a leading candidate at Georgia Tech.
And that's after Adam Schefter reported that Ken Wisenhunt is withdrawing his name from consideration.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go.
He writes that according to multiple media reports and a person familiar with the search, that person also said Clemson's Tony Elliott is another candidate. I think Larry Williams has debunked that by saying nobody has contacted Tony Elliott from Georgia Tech, according to him. So there you go. Back in a moment.
Sports Talk is the sports talk show of Main Street, South Carolina. From the coast to the mountains, we cover it all.
We've got a lot to switch in or squeeze into a very short amount of time. We're going to get more of your phone calls at 800-956-7266. We'll hear a little bit from Dabo Swinney from the College Football Playoff Joint Press Conference in Atlanta. Also hoping to get some Notre Dame and Brian Kelly also involved, and maybe even a little bit from Nick Saban talking about Dabo Swinney and a potential fourth consecutive collision course between the Tigers and the Tide.
Yep. Mike is still with us. One final question to him. We'll let him go. Then we'll get to this other good stuff. Looking ahead to the playoff, you got your four teams now set: Clemson, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, and Alabama. Of course, we can continue to debate who should be there at number 4, whatever the case may be. It is what it is now. So, how do you see these these two matchups as we look ahead down the road to the semifinals, December 29th? And I mean, is it just rubber stamp Clemson, Auburn into the championship? I mean, Clemson, Alabama into the championship game, or could either of these other teams give the two top dogs a fight and maybe surprise?
Well, one of the things we've talked about on a little podcast we do, I'll give it a plug, JC and Morgan, September.
Far be it from you to pass on an opportunity to self-promote.
Well, I mean, with the massive statewide audience that you have, I'd be a fool not to take advantage of this.
Very smart on your part.
Yes. So, I mean, to me, we've been living in an Alabama-Clemson world since Jump Street, basically. There's been some other good stories out there, but college football has never been more predictable than it's been the last few years. That's not because of the playoff. That's just the nature of, you've got right now a major line of demarcation between the elite programs in college football and the really good ones, right? I mean, we're talking about the same programs every year. And then we're talking about the same conferences, like the Pac-12 getting shut out of the playoff 3 out of 5, the Big 12 shut out 2 out of 5, the Big 10 shut out 2 out of 5. It's not exactly what everybody wanted, but it's what we have. I think what college football could sorely use is competitive matchups. I think at least one of these is going to be a fourth quarter game. I honestly don't know which one, but I just think one of them will actually turn out to be that way, and at least we'll be entertained by one of the two. But at the end of the day, I think we're still looking at another Clemson-Alabama final, which I think most of us could see coming for a while.
Yeah, and that would be 1 versus 2 and 2 unbeatens, and that would make for great drama. Last thing, real quick, not asking you to go into too deep of analysis here, but the Braves last week announced a shakeup in their broadcast crew. You've been involved with those guys in the past, so what do you think about what transpired there?
Ooh. Well, I know all those guys, but of course I worked for the organization for 5 years. So I would just say you've got a lot of talented people all just kind of working in different roles now. It's kind of a throwback to the old days where you would take Skip Carey and Pete Van Wieren, and you would rotate the radio and TV guys back and forth. And I think that's kind of the role you're seeing Joe Simpson being utilized now, where he is no longer just the TV guy. He's going to spend a lot of time on radio, a lot of time on play-by-play on radio, along with Jim, along with Don, and then he'll skip back and forth between that and TV. The main takeaway for me was this is how much they think of Jeff Francoeur. Jeff Francoeur, they believe, is a rising star, and it's not just the Braves that believe that. A lot of people in network television believe that if they didn't sign him up now, he would have taken a job with another team. So they kind of moved a lot of things around to make that work and kind of wedge him in there. And I think it's the biggest compliment of the whole thing goes to Jeff Francoeur and how much they think he can be, how good he can be as an analyst for years to come.
Mike, as always, we thank you. Let's don't be so long before our next meeting. Let's say next Thursday.
I look forward to it.
And so do we, more than you know. From the bottom of our bottoms.
He made something interesting is the fact that, when you look at it, John Smoltz started off with the Braves, and then he just jumped and went national.
He did. He's very good, too. Very good. All right, go ahead. You got a pained look on your face.
The 4 coaches in the college football playoff, we've been meaning to get to this all day.
Go ahead.
4 coaches in the college football playoff spoke today in Atlanta. Here's a little bit from head coach Dabo Swinney on the Tigers, who get ready to take on Notre Dame in the Cotton Bowl.
Yes, an honor to be back here and represent our team and our staff. This is something that we have a great appreciation for and what it takes to get here. But congratulations to these teams and these coaches as well. We're excited about going to the Cotton Bowl. I've never been to the Cotton Bowl, and I think it was Clemson's first bowl ever, 1939. So it's been a long time since Clemson's been there, and obviously I have an opportunity to compete against one of the most historic programs in all of college football, and with Notre Dame and Coach Kelly. So just look forward to a great matchup, and just hopefully a great experience for our players, and appreciate all that the college football playoff people do in putting this on. I know there's an enormous amount of work that goes in to make this a great experience for everyone involved. So appreciate that as well.
What is the X factor you've seen in your opponent?
Well, I would say they're battle tested. You know, they've been in some great venues this year, some unique places that they've had to go play. They've played some excellent teams, and they've had a lot of different challenges. I'm just kind of really diving in deeply into their season, but they've handled adversity. They've played with leads. They've come from behind. They've done a little bit of everything. So I think just that overall experience that they've had this year, you can see a very confident football team. They're incredibly well coached. They don't make a lot of mistakes. And I think the balance that they have really presents some problems. This quarterback and the change, we went through kind of a similar thing that they did. And their quarterback has just grown and grown and grown as the season has gone. So I would just say the confidence and the fact that they're battle tested from the experience that they've had this year, gives them every reason to be confident going into this postseason.
Obviously, the new redshirt rule has been a bit of a game changer this year. I'd just like to know how that has affected each one of your teams, and if there's a player or two that you could name that you're redshirting that you might think would be able to help you in the playoff.
We did not change our approach. We've always said the same thing. We're going to play this guy. This guy's on the bubble. This guy's definitely going to redshirt. And, as we get toward the end of camp, because we want to give everybody the same opportunity. Same thing. I don't ever go in with any preconceived notions, but it was great. I loved it in that we played every freshman, was able to get some type of experience. And then even a guy like Jamie Skowski, who broke a toe. So he's a veteran player, played as a true freshman, plays a true sophomore, really good player, a potential starter for us, but broke a toe and was going to miss some time. So we saw it as an opportunity to maybe get a year back, and it was something he really wanted to do as well. So we've kind of now he's played in 2 games. he's green lighted now for 2 more games, and so it's kind of a big shot in the arm to be able to get a guy like that available here in the postseason because of this rule change. And then a guy like Justin Maskell, who is a young defensive end that we've held all year. He's played in 1 game, so he's a guy also that I think could maybe help us here in the postseason. But it's been good. I mean, there has been some unintended consequences that I don't know that many of us thought about, but I think overall it's a good change.
There isn't a radio host in the state that gets more excited for updates on Jamie Skowski than this one. Just saying.
Some reason you have a man crush on the guy.
I love the guy.
Yeah,
he's just a bruiser,
well,
man.
We can arrange for a private meeting with him if you'd like.
I was like the only one to talk to him at Sugar Bowl Media Day last year.
Yeah, well, you'll get your chance to
reconvene
to do likewise. They've got Media Day coming up at Clemson. Is that next week? Also, we've got the media session in Charlotte, and I guess that'll be the next time Muschamp meets with the media, and he can tell you about Javon Kinlaw and that situation. Yeah. If indeed it is going to be a season-ending thing for Kinlaw with the hip.
They really should just come out and put out something to say, like, yeah, he's not playing. But they wouldn't do that.
Yeah. Don't you think that'd be kind of nice and neat and kind of wrap it up that way?
Would be nice.
All right. We'll be back in just a moment. David Shelton will be here. We're going to preview the 4A state championship football game. Of course, tomorrow is the Friday of Champions here in South Carolina, and we'll be broadcasting from Williams-Brice, where 3 of those championship games will be played. Back in a moment.
It is Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Programming note, Phil Kornbluth will be broadcasting tomorrow from Williams-Brice Stadium, home of the South Carolina High School League State Finals, rescheduled.
Yeah.
From Saturday
and Benedict,
to Friday.
2 games at Benedict. And unfortunately, if things had worked out schedule-wise, we'd be at Benedict tomorrow night for the 1A and 2A games. But because of the change in the schedule, got to go where the big boys are. So we'll be at Williams-Brice with 3A, 4A, and 5A. Speaking of, let's welcome in David Shelton of the High School Sports Report, the Charleston Post and Courier, commonly known around the state as Bib for Best in Business, though he won't admit it. We'll say it for him. Good evening, David. How are you?
Good evening, guys. How are y'all?
We're good. Are you tired? I know you've been writing story after story about these teams this week.
A little bit tired, but really looking forward. Really looking forward to tomorrow. Wish I could see all 5 this weekend, but as you said, they had to move them, so I'll be where the big boys are, as you call them, and I look for 3 great football games tomorrow.
Let's hope so. Let's hope we have some competitive games, not the blowouts that we've seen in the past. And I think we've got some pretty good matchups, and we'll get to the 5A meeting tomorrow night. But let's look at the 4A matchup. And again, we're looking at 2 quality teams going at it tomorrow afternoon. What do you think going in?
I think that'll be the 4A game will be the highest scoring game. I think if you were interested in betting lines and over and unders and such, I think take the over at about 70. I think both offenses will be quite explosive. They have been all year. There's no reason to believe that they're going to be any different than they have been. Greer's got a little bit better defense, but Myrtle Beach is pretty darn good. But I look for the offenses to kind of control that game. I think it's going to be an up and down type game.
Well, Myrtle Beach had such a great win over Hartsville in the semifinals, put up a lot of points. Their junior quarterback, Luke Doty, is getting a lot of praise as just a tremendous quarterback and athlete. What do you see in him, and what kind of weapons does he have to work with?
Well, he's got some weapons now. They've got a 1,000-yard rusher. They've got receivers. They throw to 3 or 4 different guys, and all of them have really good numbers. I think all of them have at least 35 or 40 catches. So they throw it around a good bit, but he's also capable of running the football. He's a very physical kid. He's about 6'2", 195 pounds, and can really run. They prefer him to throw it, but he's one of those guys who breaks down. He can take off. They do have some design runs for him. He's a handful. Luke Doty, he's definitely a handful. On the other side, Greer's got a running back that may be the best running back in the state. Dre Williams has put up 2,400 rushing yards and 30 touchdowns, and they're pretty balanced, but they kind of lean on the run a little bit. Williams also a great return guy. So each team really has some capable, explosive type players. That's why I think I just don't think you go into these games and all of a sudden become a defensive team. They both score so much points. I just think it's going to continue to do that.
Mm-hmm. I will ask you this just from the standpoint of it. It does sound like you're expecting a Big 12-like game when it comes to these 2 high-powered offenses. Which team will play the role of the defensive-style TCU-like spoiler as far as that goes? Who do you think is better on defense to handle these offensive attacks?
It's hard to say because when you compare scores and such, I think Greer is a little bit better defensively. But, because Myrtle Beach has given up some points, but sometimes both of them give up points because they're so far ahead. You give up points when you put your backups in and all that. But talking to a coach or two, they think Greer might be just a tad better defensively. But I think it's too close to call. I really do. I think both offenses are just going to be better, which is fun. I mean, I think that's a fun game to watch. And it like I said, I think there'll be more points scored in that game than any other game. Now that I said that, it'll probably be 7-6. But, the way it goes.
When you look at these 2 teams, do they both like to play tempo, or one likes to slow it down sometimes and then maybe show tempo at periods of time?
I would say if the the team with the most tempo is probably Myrtle Beach. I think when they get rolling, they like to get it up there and go. Greer's not, from what I've been able to tell, they're not like snap it every 20 second type. But the thing is about Greer, when Dre Williams gets it rolling, they feed him the ball. He also is a good receiver out of the backfield. In fact, both teams have running backs who are pretty good out of the backfield catching the football. So I think it's going to be a situation where both teams are going to be kind of finding that moment for tempo, but I don't know that that's going to be a big factor in the game.
So, David Shelton, who are you picking for the 4A championship?
Boy, it's I said today on Twitter these have been the 5 hardest games to pick, and I'm leaning to Greer. I'm leaning Greer probably 38-35.
Oh, be a great ball game and a great story with Will Young, former Clemson offensive lineman.
Yeah,
and had some health things. I believe he went through a kidney transplant. Did he not?
He did.
Yeah.
His wife gave him a kidney, which is really cool stuff.
That is. So, hey, thank you, David. Look forward to spending tomorrow and tomorrow night with you. We'll be very close by the end of the day.
Okay, I'm sure we will.
Godspeed, David Shelton.
Thank you, David Shelton, High School Sports Report, Charleston Post and Courier.
I do want to at least read some of these. The College Football Playoff Award show is going on right now. Kyler Murray won the Davey O'Brien for best quarterback. That foreshadowed the Heisman last year with Baker Mayfield. So that's at least telling when it comes to the way those things go. The Thorpe Award for best defensive back, DeAndre Baker of Georgia. That is no surprise there, winning over Greedy Williams. A little bit of surprise, at least from a local standpoint, on the Doak Walker Award. Jonathan Taylor of Wisconsin edges out Travis Etienne. If Clemson wasn't so married to their running back rotation, that might have been Etienne, but who knows?
Well, the question I have is, do they go the intangible route here of thinking, wait a minute, didn't the Oklahoma quarterback win last year? Do we want to give it to another Oklahoma quarterback? Or do we, and I guess my thoughts are straight here, we give it to the maybe the first Hawaiian to win the Heisman?
The kicker from Syracuse wins the Groza Award, by the way.
All right, let's go to Lou, who's been holding on for a while in Hanahan. And there you go. Lou, welcome in, sir. Maybe not.
Hey. Can you hear me, Phil?
Yeah, Lou. How are you?
Man, I'm just doing fine and dandy, unless I don't have a piece of candy. But I tell you, I'll take a good name. It'd be Phil Kornblut and the Carolina Packers. No pun intended. But I was calling to talk about the Deebo Samuel situation and a couple points of light, so to speak. And if you can ask the engineer, please do not hang up on me, because the radio stations down here have the Dawn Staley show on. So,
well, you got to go in about 90 seconds you got before the break.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
First of all, I'm totally against what Dabo Deebo did. I think it's a disservice to the university. Of course, his coach is not going to say nothing, like y'all said, because of the fact that it hurts recruiting. The teammates are always going to support your teammates, and they might want to borrow some money later on. So, but the university's probably paid over $200,000, $300,000 for his education, and you don't shoot with a scared stick. But the main thing is, those guys who blocked for him and threw to him and helped him all the way through there, I really feel like he's letting them down. Of course, he's letting down the big boosters that pay the money for their scholarships. And, I am just totally against it. I'm sure I think he will be the first or second round player to ever at the University of South Carolina go out early and skip a bowl game. I mean, you're going back all the way to George Rogers, John Abraham, etc. I certainly think it's bad. The last thing, and then I'll hold on so I can hear you, is that the percentage-wise of winning is Warren Gazay has that. That's 67%. But Muschamp has 56% winning percentage. So, yeah, you can go by games because there's more games now, but I go by winning percentage.
Yeah, good formula.
Deebo took one class this semester, okay? So let's not sit here and say that, South Carolina was really burdened by the fact that he took one class for the extra year that he took here. I'm just saying. That argument's very hollow to me.
Thank you for your call. Be right back.
The guys are always checking email. Send your comments or questions to talkback@sportstalksc.com. Now, more of Sports Talk from Columbia's Main Street.
I will renounce the Mets if Tim Tebow plays one game on the Major League roster. I will renounce them.
Wow.
They need some reason for people to talk about them.
I will renounce them.
One more thing about Deebo Samuel, since it was brought up just a moment ago, and then we're going to hear from who are we hearing from?
Notre Dame's head coach Brian Kelly.
Yeah, I just and I alluded to this earlier about his management, whoever these folks are that he has signed up with. I have no clue who ESM happens to be.
Dr. Sterling Harris says it's more of an event management group.
I get that. It's not his agent per se who'll be negotiating his contract and all that thing. But they put out a release today. Apparently, some people wanted to talk to Deebo, and they put out a statement that says, quote, though Deebo is one of the most marketable players in this draft class, Deebo has made the decision he will not do any public appearances until post-bowl game because he wants the state of South Carolina to be totally focused on their football team and not him. Well, any appearances he does leading up to the bowl game or Christmas will only be philanthropic or charitable in nature because that's what he's passionate for. It will probably focus on low-income and at-risk youth because that's who he's passionate about helping.
It's not like he says anything anyway.
But Deebo's not a terrific talker to begin with. That's just not who he is.
I think he's actually a terrific talker. I just don't think he likes to talk. That's all.
I've never really heard him say anything over his 4 years, and even going back following his recruiting out of Chapman High School that, he would elongate on. I mean, but that's not to take anything away from him as a personality or anything like that. But just the way this whole thing was handled this week, you announce you're not going to the bowl game to play with your team, and then the next day there's a statement out that you will play in the Senior Bowl. I just think that was poor timing and not very smart. I'm opposed to anybody skipping their bowl games and leaving their teammates high and dry if you're healthy, able to play, and not being nagged by some injury that you could aggravate by playing in the bowl game. Like Chuck Reedy said, man, you can get hurt lifting weights, stretching, any sort of preparation towards whether it's football, basketball, anything, you can get hurt. And you start walking around saying, well, what's going to happen next is high school kids. What's going to happen with high school kids who already have their scholarships tucked away, and
what's happened?
And they don't want to play. Yeah, we actually have seen it a little bit where players have skipped the Shrine Bowl because they don't want to risk getting hurt, but they do go play in the Army All-American game. I have a problem with that.
We've had players skip entire senior seasons as a result of that. Couple times. If I remember correctly, there was a couple guys.
You mean high school players?
Yeah.
Well, if you're hurt,
if you had a commitment of some sort.
I have not seen a player skip his entire senior season because he was already committed, unless he had a major injury or something.
I'm saying they had an injury, but they didn't come back and play the entire season.
As much as he was criticized, and people accused him of taking plays off and taking games off. Clowney played in his last bowl game, all right? He didn't let that slip, and he was going to be the #1 pick in the draft, and he went out and played in his last bowl game. So anyway, that's it for that. I just think it's been kind of poorly handled here and a poor decision as from where I sit. But you know what? Nobody asked me.
And he's sitting in the minority on that one.
And they still haven't asked me. You know what? They hadn't picked up the phone and said, Corn, what do you think? My opinion would not change.
The 4 college football playoff head coaches convened in Atlanta. The college football playoff awards are going on currently, but before those started, we got to hear from all 4 of the coaches. Here's a little bit of what Notre Dame head coach Brian Kelly had to say when he was surveyed about his team's matchup with Clemson in the Cotton Bowl.
Well, it's certainly an honor for the University of Notre Dame to be part of this great group of coaches and certainly teams. We're the new kid on the block. This is our first time in the college football playoffs, but something that we obviously look towards each and every year. We're certainly looking forward to an incredible matchup against a team in Clemson and a coach in Dabo Swinney who's been here 4 years, knows what it's like, and we'll have a great challenge. But we have a great respect for all of the coaches that are here. They've done it before. So we certainly look at it each and every year as a goal for our football team. It's a difficult one, but one that we all look forward to and getting to this. So again, a great honor. Great to be with these coaches today, and looking forward to the challenge in front of us.
What is the X factor you've seen in your opponent?
Well, obviously, when you talk about playing an opponent, it's the ability to close games out, the ability to know how to win. And that's Clemson. They know how to win football games. They've been winning. And so, I think everybody that's up here has developed and built a winning culture within their football team. So you can't pin that on any one particular player. That's something that's within, the fabric of the football program that's been built over time. So that would be the X factor.
Obviously, the new redshirt rule has been a bit of a game changer this year. I'd just like to know how that has affected each one of your teams, and if there's a player or two that you could name that you're redshirting that you might think would be able to help you in the playoff.
Yeah, I would agree with everybody in terms of, we make most of those decisions, early in the year, and then kind of progress relative to who's going to be redshirting, who's not. But, there are some positives. So we lost a good player in the first game of the year. We'll be able to get him back for this game, and then he'll have, only 2 games and the potential to, gain a year back because he wasn't, redshirted. We played a freshman quarterback that probably we would not have played in mop-up duty. So you get a chance to get him out and get a little experience in those situations. But I think by and large, I think it really hasn't changed the landscape. It gives you, maybe a little inventory on special teams here and there, but I think by and large, it's been a good rule.
As Notre Dame head coach Brian Kelly, again, Clemson and Notre Dame face off in the Cotton Bowl, December the 29th.
I like Brian Kelly for the mere fact that Notre Dame a few years ago, everybody was
they want him gone.
They were reading his epitaph.
They want him gone.
And now here he goes. He's Lazarus.
They have lived a charmed life this year. Beat Michigan by 7, beat Ball State by 8, beat Vandy by 5. Those were all at home. They beat a number 7 ranked Stanford at home by 3 touchdowns, which was a nice win at the time. Stanford went on to kind of flame out this year. They beat Virginia Tech on the road solidly, but Virginia Tech was not very good. Only a 5-point win over Pitt this year. That was at home. 3
of their wins are against teams that are currently in the top 25, at least in the college football playoff final top 25. The victory over Syracuse, victory over Northwestern, victory over Michigan at the beginning of the year.
They beat Southern Cal to close out the regular season by 7. They've just had a lot of close wins over not very good teams. I think Clemson will smoke them. As Chuck said, the athletes are just different. Well, they've got a quarterback that has really good numbers. He didn't start the year as their starter, and Brian Kelly went to him because they were kind of stagnating on offense, and this guy gave them some new life on offense.
Passing game. Wimbush is more of a runner.
The one thing that, and again, I hate to go all the way back to when they faced off in the national championship game, Alabama Notre Dame, back when Manti Te'o was there, but the one thing that stood out that I don't think that they still don't have there is they do not have the strength in the trenches to be able to stand up to what Clemson's going to bring on the defensive line or even on the offensive line with guys like Mitch Hyatt and Falcinelli and the guys up front. They just do not have the kind of strength and depth to be able to win that type of battle with Clemson. Yes, they have skill position players, and yes, they have a good quarterback, but from the standpoint of where they win that battle in the trenches, I do not think they can stand up to where Clemson is.
I think team speed is going to catch them too.
Also. Clemson secondary faces a test. Now, pressure on Book will be important, but this is a 70% passer, 19 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. We do know if Clemson can have an issue somewhere, if you give a good quarterback, a good passing quarterback some time, they can give up some plays.
They love the quick game, too. That was the thing that burned them against Texas A&M. That's the one area, if they can be efficient in it, they can give Clemson
Of course,
problems.
I'm assuming, I'm making a dangerous assumption here that Ian Book is actually going to play in the bowl game. Tomorrow night, I'll be over at Williams-Brice. Looking forward to it. And you guys will be here. We're breaking up. The bottom 4 will be broken up tomorrow night, just for the night. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.